Hey everyone, hope you're all enjoying the end of July here. So today we're going to be going over 3 questions from Bluebook Test 1, Reading and Writing, Section 1, Module 1. And they are a cross-text connection question and a function and structure question. 2 function and structure questions, okay? So these are kind of different from each other, but there's not that many of them in this section, so I wanted to do them all in one. And we will go over strategy for each type of question, okay? So the first question here, right, is about which choice best describes the function of the second sentence and the overall structure of the text, right? So let's read the passage. Astronomers are confident that the star Betelgeuse will eventually consume all the helium in its core and explode in a supernova. They are much less confident, however, about when this will happen, since that depends on internal characteristics of Betelgeuse that are largely unknown. Astrophysicist Serafina L. Badri Nance and colleagues recently investigated whether acoustic waves in the star could be used to determine internal stellar states, but concluded that this method could not sufficiently reveal Betelgeuse's internal characteristics to allow its evolutionary state to be firmly fixed. Okay, so then let's look at the choices. A. It explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. B. It presents the central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. C. It identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not. And D. It describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. So if we look at the sentence again, right, they are much less confident, however, about when this will happen, since that depends on internal characteristics of Betelgeuse that are largely unknown. So when the helium explosion will occur, right? Or the consumption of helium and then the explosion. So we basically have 3 parts: the introduction, then the sentence we're looking at, and then the part about El Badri Nance, right, and colleagues and how they investigate this thing, right? So if we look at the choices with these types of overall structure questions and function, right, it's like, what is it doing? So we want to think, is it doing each thing? And then we will eliminate based on that. So we're going to do, it explains how the work of Nance and colleagues was received by others in the field. So we haven't even met Nance and colleagues, so how are we going to know what their work is? And it's not really about their work and reception, so A doesn't really make sense. It presents the central finding reported by Nance and colleagues. It's not about a finding, right? It's about a lack of information. So that also doesn't really work. It identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not. So I like to break this up, right? It identifies a problem. So there is a problem, right? Because there's something they're less confident about. So C seems like a good option. And then D, it describes a serious limitation of the method used by Nance and colleagues. Again, doesn't tell us about the method because it's talking about how they know one thing, astronomers in general, right? Not the other part. So just tracing where Nance is mentioned, right, helps us eliminate A and D. And then C is the best choice, right, because it gives us the problem they're working on, whether acoustic waves could be used to determine the states, right? And if they can determine the states, then they can firmly fix its evolutionary state, right? So C is the best choice. It identifies the problem that Nance and colleagues attempted to solve but did not. Great. So now let's go to the next question, which is question 4. The mimosa tree evolved in East Asia, where the beetle Brachydius tyrannus preys on its seeds. In 1785, some mimosa trees were introduced to North America, far from any B. tyrannus, but evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents. Around 2001, B. tyrannus was introduced in southeastern North America, near where botanist Shu Mei Chang and colleagues had been monitoring mimosa trees. Within a year, 93% of the trees had been attacked by the beetles. Which choice best describes the function of the third sentence and the overall structure of the text? It states the hypothesis that Chang and colleagues had set out to investigate using mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. It presents a generalization that is exemplified by the discussion of the mimosa trees and B. tyrannus. It offers an alternative explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues, provides context that clarifies why the species mentioned spreads to new locations. So let's look at D. It provides context. There's not really context here. It just says there's a link between predators and prey. So it's probably not that one. Offers an alternative explanation for the findings of Chang and colleagues. The alternative finding is here, right? But it's not really giving an alternative explanation because they don't even have an explanation there, right? It presents a generalization that is exemplified by the discussion of emotional trees. So let's look at this. Is it a generalization? Yeah, evolutionary links between predators and their prey can persist across centuries and continents is a generalization. Okay. And then it states that the hypotheses that Chang and colleagues had set out to investigate. So it's not a hypothesis, right? That'd be a very big hypothesis to be making based off of this. It's just a generalization, so it's not A. So then we are left with B and C, right? It presents a generalization that is exemplified. So the generalization, right, is evolutionary links between predators and prey can persist across centuries. And how is it exemplified by B. tyrannus, right? So it was in 1785 that they were separated because they were introduced to North America. And then the mimosa trees were, right? And then B. tyrannus was introduced in 2001. So centuries have passed, right? The centuries here. And then they still had been attacked by 93% within a year. So that shows that there's still a connection. So B makes the most sense. Okay. And now we'll do the last one, a cross-text connection one. Based on the text, how would Focarelli and Panetta text to most likely respond to fans' finding? Okay, so let's see. And you want to keep track of names, right? On cross-text connections, you want to know who's talking about who. When companies in the same industry propose merging with one another, they often claim that the merger will benefit consumers by increasing efficiency and therefore lowering prices. Economist Ying Fan investigated this notion in the context of the United States newspaper market. She modeled a hypothetical merger of Minneapolis area newspapers and found that subscription prices would rise following a merger. And then text 2. Economists Dario Focarelli and Fabio Panetta have argued that research on the effect of mergers on prices has focused excessively on short-term effects. Okay, so that's an important thing. That's what they're arguing, which tend to be adverse for consumers, right? Which means it's negative. Using the case of consumer banking in Italy, they showed that over the long term, right, as opposed to short term, the efficiency gains realized by merged companies do result in economic benefits for consumers. So based on the text, how would Focarelli and Panetta most likely respond to fans' findings? They would argue that over the long term, expenses incurred by the merged companies will also increase. That wouldn't make sense, right? Because they're saying efficiency is gained. It's probably not that one. They would recommend that fan compare the near-term effect of a merger on the subscription prices in the Minneapolis area with the effect of a merger in another newspaper market. So that's talking about comparing across place, but they're really talking about comparing across time, right? So I'm not fully eliminating them, but I'm sort of putting a mark saying I'm doubtful about that, right? They would encourage fan to investigate whether the projected effect on the subscription price persists over an extended period. Okay, so they're talking about how they focus on extended periods. And then D, they would claim that mergers have a different effect on consumer prices in the newspaper industry than in most other industries. Again, they're not focused on comparing across industries, right? So you could kind of see like if they had no choice, right? And they were told like actually over the long term it also doesn't work, then they would be like, well, the newspaper is just an exception, right? But when we look at what a fan did, right? Investigated this notion in the context of the newspaper market. She modeled and found, right? So there's no mention of how long she's doing it for. So they might think that she does it for too short a time and they will encourage her to do it for a longer time. C, okay? So that's how we'll do this one. So with these, right, what you want to do is read both of them, understand who is who, right? Focarelli and Panetta, it helped to say it was text 2 and there's no one else talking there, and text 1 was fan, right? And then think what's their main argument for each person. And they were about short-term versus long-term. So that really guided any question that had to do, or choice that had something else besides that was probably not right, right? And this one, like the first two, is all about using the answer choices and eliminating thinking, why is this one wrong? Why is this one wrong? Why is this one wrong? Why can this one maybe be right? Right? If you just go immediately trying to look for the right answer, you're complicating it for yourself and you're skipping over this. So process of elimination I like because it helps you think through every answer choice, so you're taking into account all the data. What students often do is they just read them quickly, try to go for the right answer. But if you can think of, and they just focus on the answer they think is right, but if you think, why is each of them wrong, then you're going to get to study all 4 answers, and that will help you be more thoughtful in your answer choices. Right? So that applies for any question, reading and writing, but especially for these. And then specifically for these, right, you want to look at the underlined passage and the underlined portion of the passage and try to change it into wording and think about, well, what is this doing? What is this, right? Like here, it is a generalization. It's not a hypothesis. It's not an alternative explanation. And that will break it down for you. We'll do more like this in the future for other Bluebook tests. I have videos on grammar and vocabulary and transitions and rhetorical synthesis. And if you have any questions, like always, put them in the comments. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. I'm making these all the time. I'm also doing math. And I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.